The night was freezing cold. Dark clouds drifted slowly across the mountains, while soft rain soaked the empty streets of a tiny village hidden deep between the hills. Far away from the noise of the city, there stood an ancient Buddhist temple. Old wooden walls, small glowing lanterns, the soft sound of bells moving with the wind, and the faint scent of incense floating through the air. An old monk lived in that temple. His name was Ryokan. People traveled from distant places just to sit with him, because anyone who spent even a few moments near him felt a strange... The villagers often said the calmness in his eyes looked exactly like the peace they imagined in Buddha's eyes. Inside the temple stood a very old statue of Buddha, made of stone, eyes gently closed, a peaceful expression on his face, as if he had seen every sorrow in the world and still remained calm. The walls of the temple were covered with paintings from Buddha's life. In one painting, Prince Siddhartha was leaving his palace behind. In another, he sat silently beneath the Bodhi tree. And in one painting, Buddha smiled gently while teaching compassion to others. Whenever someone arrived at the temple broken from life, Ryokan would always repeat one teaching of Buddha. Pain is a part of life, but suffering endlessly is something the mind holds on to. One evening, as the rain became heavier, a young man slowly climbed the long stone stairs leading to the temple. His name was Ethan. His face looked exhausted, not physically, but deeply, internally tired. His eyes carried the kind of exhaustion that appears after fighting life for too long. In the temple courtyard, Ethan saw the old monk quietly sweeping wet leaves from the ground. Ryokan looked at him and gave a soft smile. "You've come from very far away." Ethan forced a weak smile. "I don't even know where to go anymore." Without asking any questions, the monk invited him inside. A small fire burned gently in the center of the room. Tea boiled slowly in an old iron pot. Outside, rain continued to fall softly. For a long time. And strangely, that silence itself felt comforting. But eventually, Ethan could no longer hold back the pain inside him. In a trembling voice, he whispered, "I'm tired. I try every day to fix my life, but nothing ever changes." The monk listened quietly. Ethan continued, "I watch motivational videos. I try to stay positive. I make goals. I push myself." Then he looked down and said softly, "But inside, I still feel empty." Silence filled the room again. Only the sound of rain could be heard. Then Ethan finally asked, "Master, how do I stay motivated in life?" The monk stared at the fire for a few moments. Then he quietly asked, "When was the last time you sat completely still?" Ethan looked confused. "What do you mean?" "Without your phone, without music, without distraction, just with yourself." Ethan became silent, because the truth was, he couldn't remember. His life was always filled with noise. Headphones while walking, videos before sleeping, phone first thing in the morning. Even when he felt broken, he distracted himself, because being alone with his thoughts felt terrifying. The monk slowly poured tea into 2 cups. Then he said, "Most people think silence is empty." He handed Ethan a cup of tea. But the truth is, silence reveals what noise tries to hide. Those words hit Ethan deeply, because for years he had been running from failure, from loneliness, from fear.
and from himself. Whenever silence appeared in his life, he filled it with noise.
Distractions. Anything. Just to avoid facing himself. Suddenly, the monk stood up. "Come with me." Together, they walked behind the temple toward a small pond. The rain had stopped. Cold wind moved softly through the fog-covered mountains. The water in the pond was shaking because of the wind. The monk asked, "What do you see?" Ethan looked carefully. "I can't see my reflection clearly." The monk smiled gently. "Because the water is not still." Then both of them stood there silently. Slowly, the wind calmed down. The pond became perfectly still. And now Ethan could finally see his reflection clearly. The monk looked at him and said, "When life becomes filled with too much noise, pressure, comparison, and fear, a person can no longer see themselves clearly." Tears filled Ethan's eyes, because deep inside, he knew it was true. For years, he had tried to become better, but never stopped long enough to understand why he was hurting in the first place. The monk sat beside the pond. Today's world worships motivation. He smiled softly. But motivation never stays forever. Some days it comes, some days it disappears. But silence is different. Ethan listened carefully. In silence, you hear what your soul has been trying to tell you for years. Cold wind brushed against Ethan's face, and for the first time, he stopped fighting his thoughts. He simply sat there quietly, listening to the wind, the trees, his own breathing, and slowly, the heaviness inside his chest began to fade. After a while, Ethan asked, "Why does silence feel so uncomfortable?" The monk smiled. "Because silence removes distractions, and when distractions disappear, a person meets themselves for the first time." Tears rolled down Ethan's face. He remembered all the nights he had felt completely broken, while pretending to smile in front of everyone else. The monk gently said, "You are not weak. You are simply exhausted, because your soul has never truly rested." Ethan broke down crying. Because his whole life, people had told him, "Work harder, be stronger, stay motivated." But nobody had ever said, "Sit quietly for a while. Let your heart rest." The monk looked toward the mountains. Nature does not grow through noise. The moon rises in silence. The sun sets in silence. And healing also happens in silence. After some time, they returned inside the temple. The Buddha statue glowed softly in the candlelight. Ethan stared at it quietly. Then he asked, "Was Buddha ever unhappy too?" The monk smiled. Buddha did not become great because he had no suffering. He became great because he stopped running from suffering. Rain softly tapped against the wooden roof. The monk continued. When Siddhartha first saw sickness, old age, and death, his heart was shaken too. But he did not drown himself in distractions. He chose silence. Ethan listened carefully. The monk sat beside the Buddha statue. For years, Buddha sat in forests, under trees, beside rivers, because he wanted to understand why human beings suffer so deeply. Then he looked at Ethan. And one day, he realized that humanity's greatest suffering is not the outside world, but the noise inside the mind. Ethan's breathing slowed. The monk continued softly.
People think enlightenment is some magical thing. But perhaps enlightenment simply means stopping the war within yourself. Silence filled the room again. But this time, the silence did not feel heavy. There was pain in it. There were tears.
More noise. But true peace comes when the mind finally becomes still. The next morning, Ethan prepared to leave the temple. Soft sunlight slowly appeared behind the mountains. Cold wind moved gently through the air. Temple bells echoed quietly in the distance. As he turned to leave, Ethan asked, "Master, what if my motivation disappears again?" The monk smiled softly. "It will." Ethan looked surprised. Motivation is like the weather. It changes all the time. But silence? Silence will always guide you back to yourself. Ethan bowed respectfully. Then, before leaving, he looked one last time at the Buddha statue. He closed his eyes, and for the first time, he stopped asking life for success, for motivation, or for a perfect future. He asked only for peace. And perhaps that was the moment his healing truly began. He slowly walked down the long stone stairs. The world was still the same. Life was still the same. His problems were still there. But this time, there was peace inside him. And sometimes, peace is far